Everybody ready?
Must be part of aging.
I'd like to call the Gurnee Village Board regular meeting of March 2nd, 2020 to order. Roll call, please. Andy?
O'Brien.
Present.
Balmas.
Present.
Hood.
Here.
Thorstensen.
Here.
Ross.
Here.
Garner.
Here.
6 present.
All right, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, good evening, and we will be finishing up our budget workshop as soon as we get through new business. All right, so first item is approval of the consent agenda as presented.
So
Do I have a
moved.
motion? Motion from trustee Balmas, second from trustee Thorstensen. Roll call, please.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Balmas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
Thorstensen.
Yes.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
6 aye.
Motion carries. Patrick, please read the consent agenda into the record.
Item number 1, approval of the minutes from the February 17, 2020 meeting. Item number 2, approval of request to allow Economic Development Director Ellen Dean to attend the International Council of Shopping Centers, RECON, in Las Vegas, Nevada, from May 17th through 19th, 2020, at a cost not to exceed $2,100. Item number 3, approval of setting a bid date of April 9th, 2020 for 2020 street maintenance program. Item number 4, approval of payroll for period ending February 14th, 2020 in the amount of $853,821.86. Item number 5, approval of bills for the period ending March 2nd, 2020 in the amount of $347,745.17.
Thank you, Patrick. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as read into the record? Motion by trustee Garner, second by trustee Balmas. Roll call, please.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Balmas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
Thorstensen.
Yes.
Ross. Garner.
Aye.
6 aye.
All right, motion carries. We have no petitions and communications.
Correct.
We have no reports,
Correct.
no old business.
Not tonight.
All right. The first item is approval of ordinance 2020-11,
11.
approving an intergovernmental agreement by and between the Village of Gurnee and the Warren-Waukegan Fire Protection District of Lake County, Illinois. And we do have the president of the Warren-Waukegan Fire Protection District with us tonight, Marty Klauber. So, Pat.
Yeah, I was going to kick it to John and let John
Okay.
walk you through this.
John, our chief.
As most of you know, we've had a relationship with the fire district for a long time, actually going back to 1931.
Whoa.
We've formalized that contract in about 77, and ever since we've been partners. The fire department doesn't see borders between the village or district. They're all our residents, and that's how it's always been. Working with the current Warren-Waukegan District Board, we were able to sit down for about 15 minutes and renegotiate a contract. It was probably the smoothest, it was the smoothest contract I've negotiated with the district to date. Part of the contract is we're going to continue with the same formula we are for the operating budget. We're going to add a CPI each year, so this year CPI will roll on, will continue on, and that's working out very well for both sides. The other thing the fire district's done this year, they stepped up and along with you have seen the need for Fire Station 3. The fire district, we worked through it, and through a percentage of calls, we looked at the total price of the project, and the fire district has stepped up with $2 million over the next 2 years. The way the contract's been structured, they'll make quarterly payments over the next 2 years of $250,000 each. It was just a pleasure to work with Marty. He was their lead negotiator. He did well. Their attorney, everyone on the board, really, the transition, the time we sent things back and forth. It's a good relationship. Obviously, we recommend approval of the contract. If you have any questions, I'm here. Marty's here as well.
That's nice to hear. Thank you for working with us. Thank you for your help on Fire Station 3. It's a win-win. Yeah, it's a win-win for both of us because it picks up the coverage improves the coverage area on your southern border, and certainly helps us with logistics when we're dispatching by having that station, jump station kind of in the middle. So, I mean, it's a win-win. Questions, Trustee Ross? Oh, okay.
Move to approve.
I have a motion from Trustee Ross and a second from Trustee Thorstensen. Any discussion? All right, roll call, please.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
Thorstensen.
Yes.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
6-0.
Thank you.
Motion carries, and we look forward to another 3 years, minimum.
Thank you.
We really appreciate that. All right. And thank your board, Marty, too. Thank the rest of your board, too. Okay. All right, item number 2 is approval of ordinance 2020-12, authorizing the execution of a First Amendment to the intergovernmental agreement for dispatch services by and between the Village of Gurnee and the City of Zion.
Sure. So Chief Smith and I touched on this a little bit during the budget workshop. So we have a agreement with the City of Zion, approved it back in December 2016 for dispatch services. We provide them police and fire dispatching out of our communications center. Went live with this in July 2017. Also, as you know, the Northeast Lake County Consolidated Jetsby, Zion sits on that board along with members from the Village of Gurnee. As Chief Smith alluded to, Zion is in need of replacing the police radios. That's a pretty significant cost. It'll be shared between the Jetsby and Zion. Zion, when they started looking at this, they were looking at a lease purchase and possibly spreading that over 3 years. Our current contract with Zion for dispatching has 2 years left on it, so we use this as an opportunity to open up that contract with Zion to see if we could extend the contract terms with them. Obviously, we've invested a lot of resources in our dispatch center to be able to provide services to them, so if we can extend that contract, that's a win for both of us. Talked to Zion about it. They were amenable. What we came with was extending the contract for an additional 3 years. So that'll take us out to April 20th, 2025 at this point. In exchange for that, the village also agreed to freeze the contract price just for 1 year. So right now, they're at about $915,000 per year is what they paid for fiscal year 1920. We would hold that $915 for 2021, then go back to the CPI increase that we have in the contract, which is no less than 1%, no higher than 3.5%. Zion took a look at this. They were agreeable. They put it before their city council on February 18th and approved it, and now it's ready for your consideration.
All right, questions from the board? I'm glad we were able to work this out with the City of Zion. I'm a big admirer of Mayor McKinney. He's an amazing person.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion from Trustee Balmas, second from Trustee O'Brien. Roll call, please.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
Thorstensen.
Yes.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
6-0.
All right, motion carries. Item number 3, approval of ordinance 2020-13, authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement between the County of Lake and the Village of Gurnee for the transfer of real property south of Grand Avenue, also known as State Road 132.
Sure. So Lake County DOT reached out to our engineering division. They were basically doing taking a look at all the properties that they own. They identified some surplus property along Grand Avenue. There is a map included in your packet. One parcel is right up against the Canadian Pacific Railroad, just south of Grand on the east side of the railroad, and then you've got another smaller parcel further to the east. Both of them are just open space, natural area right now. The village owns property next to these that we maintain as open wooded space. The county wasn't interested in them since we had property next to them. We said we would take them at no cost. The county was agreeable, so this intergovernmental agreement transfers those properties from the county to the village. If the village ever wanted to do anything with these properties, we would have to submit written request to Lake County DOT's county engineer before we could do anything. But at this point in time, we don't foresee ever doing anything with these properties, just leave it natural.
Questions from the trustees?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by trustee Balmas, second by trustee Garner. Roll call, please.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Balmas.
Aye.
Hood.
Yes.
Thorstenson.
Yes.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
6-0.
All right, item number 4 is approval of ordinance 2020-14, authorizing the execution of an intergovernmental agreement entitled Gurney Days Operating Agreement with the Gurney Park District. We have probably for the last decade talked about various sustainability issues with Gurney Days, and as a and I know it's very important to our residents, but it has been a struggle with volunteers, it's been a struggle with revenues, and as we know, expenses go up. So we have, the village and the park district had discussions really for the last couple of years about the best way to make sure that we can continue Gurney Days and grow it and make it reflective of the community. I know it's a major change, and we probably want to discuss it, but it's really something that it was getting to the point it was not sustainable. So we do have one of the past presidents of Gurney Days here in case there's a question from the board related to the Gurney Days operation that Craig Owens can answer for us. And then trustee Thorstenson has been actively involved on the Gurney Days committee for the last decade.
20 years, but 10 years
Okay,
with
who's
Heather.
counting? So anyways, I will open it to questions, and then we can see where everybody lands. Trustee Thorstenson?
Maybe just one key point, and Craig has all the numbers to fill it in, but we've been seeing the decline in the committee member, the leads, people from our community that's leading the events for, I would say, 5 years. And we get a couple more people come back on, but they would come on and go off. So 2 summers ago, just following the 2018 Gurney Days, I was invited to go the next weekend to observe Grays Lake Days, and just what you want to do after 4 days here. But they had, just as a key observation, they had, all of their events were compressed into a day and a half, Friday night and Saturday. Ours are, 3.5-ish days, kind of starting on Thursday. Plus, they have, I got their lineup, and they had less than half of the events that we did. So over the years, when we had a robust committee group, we were growing our events. We had up to 40 events. We were, excited, and anybody brings in a new idea, we would, let them lead the event. So we were adding and adding. But then last year was kind of the pivotal event, or pivotal year for us. So Craig could run in through the numbers if you want, but I've been doing the sponsors, so the revenue portion for the last 5+ years. And, the classic horrible situation where revenues were down, expenses were up. And I would say the biggest thing is we lost 6 committee members at the end of last year. The entire public relations marketing group all had full-time jobs, and they had to go get on with their lives. Sponsor people, the tent, so core activities that you can't, you need some type of marketing, you need somebody to manage the tents, so really core people. So I just wanted to throw that out there. We've got other things we can discuss, but, kind of the equation didn't look good at the end of last year.
But yeah, the event's gotten so big that it's beyond what volunteers can manage adequately year-round, because it really does take a year-round effort to planning. But certainly can listen to other ideas about how to make Gurney Days sustainable without this agreement. Trustee Balmas?
Well, I appreciate the fact that, an effort is being made to maintain Gurney Days. And I served on the committee for 30 years before I took a leave. And obviously, it's near and dear to my heart. But when I've talked to the few people that were still on the committee, transferring it, and I know the Park District was very involved, and they continue to have been involved, and that the property, you know, it is their property that we've been using for Gurney Days and that. So I get all of that. But in the transfer, nothing was said about the monetary part of it, you know, the transfer of the money from the Gurney Days Corporation, that dollar amount, which I don't even know what that dollar amount is, and the Park District has not given us an accounting for that money and how it was going to be used. You know, even in Gurney Days, there was a budget presented. We don't have that. And, you know, just to turn it over to the Park District without an accounting bothers me. That I think there should be something that we're aware of it. If, you know, if there's an event that's not going to be happening, why is it not being happening? And if somebody wants to have an event, will it be allowed? You know, if it's now all under the control of the Park District, you know, in the past, when somebody came forth to the Gurney Days Corporation and said, hey, you know, back when the car show started, they came to us and said, hey, we'd like to do this car show, we'll run it, you know, it won't cost us anything other than inclusive in the advertising. Is that going to still be able to be done when it's now under the control of the Park District? And what if the Park District now extends it and it becomes, you know, right now, many of the events are free. What if they start charging for it? Then is there some kind of contribution back to the village since we're providing so much? You know, is that, because, you know, it's out of our budget as a village. You know, is that going to be made available? I just don't, I'm not comfortable with the fact that we're not getting any of that kind of information. It's not within this agreement, you know,
All right, so we get zero information now about Gurney Days budget and how money's being spent, and,
but there is a budget presented.
but it's not public, where it
You
will be
can
with
ask
the
for it
Park
anytime.
District.
Right now, we don't have anything.
Well-
Anytime you could have gotten that budget from the Gurney Days Corporation.
If you,
I was the treasurer for a lot of years. I know a budget was done.
it may be for you, but for us, the village, we weren't getting, we had no idea revenues and expense, other than we kept hearing they were losing money. If you want to keep it as a volunteer organization, I just don't know that you can get enough volunteers.
And I
then
appreciate
you have
that.
the expense on the village and the Park District, and we don't get any say in things. I mean, this is,
But you had, the Park District had representatives. If you had, the village had a representative
But
on the
not
board. If
a
they did not
majority.
bring it back,
Right.
then it's your representative's fault for not bringing it back.
no, representative is just like up here, one vote. So the changes that the Park District or us wanted that would have maybe saved money or been more efficient, reduced costs, we weren't the majority. And when you get into a lack of volunteers to run all this, and it falls on staff, and then we're giving comp time, it gets very expensive.
And I appreciate that fact, and I get it. And I understand why this is probably a good move, except I still think there should be an accounting, especially since the village is providing services and investing in it. You don't just give your stuff away without some kind of accounting.
Well, if it goes back to being a volunteer group, would you want us to be charging the Gurney Days Corporation for all of our hours?
In the past, we acknowledged that within the corporation, at least during the time that I was involved. I don't know what's happened in the
if the board,
last 3
you know,
years or whatever.
Gurney Days Corporation has dissolved or is in the process of dissolving. Correct, Craig? Yes, we voted to dissolve. Okay. The Park District Board has approved it, so if we want to go back to a volunteer organization, who would lead that? Gurney Days Corporation acknowledges they were not sustainable. It could not keep going, and if there was any chance of saving Gurney Days for this community, it's going to fall to the Park District and the village to work together. And neither of us are profit-making centers, so I can't see the Park District trying to make a profit. Now, would they do things so they make enough money to cover their expenses? And probably some of ours, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I don't think, I find it hard to believe, and if you want to modify the contract, that they can't make a profit. I don't even know how you, governments don't make profits. I mean,
Well, and I would point out that, this is renewable, so I think there will be an adequate time for both the Park District and our board to feel comfortable to see how this works out. If you look at the exhibits, there really has been a division of the contributions for the event, and it is pretty consistent in terms of the village's side. And so as we work together to create this agreement, if there were issues about programming, that could be addressed in a subsequent contract. I mean, at this point, I don't think anyone's anticipating that the park board would not listen to suggestions made by the village if there were particular concerns. And some of the concerns that you've mentioned in terms of letting the village know or letting the public know what events are going to be scheduled for this upcoming event is something I'm sure that they would be willing to accommodate. It is written so that tasks are assigned to the different entities. It is very instructive, but it isn't, it is not, really isn't possible at this point, I think, to provide any more definition than assigning the different categories. And I think from the village's perspective, they looked at those categories and they did seem to make sense and was consistent with the involvement from last year. So in light of what you've heard also from, the current corporation, I mean, this is the path forward at this point, I think, for this coming summer.
Question?
Trustee Ross?
Just a couple things. When we first heard about this, we heard that it wasn't going to substantially change, that basically it was going to stay the same, at least for a couple of years. And that isn't really specified in this agreement. It's just listed as, these are possible things, which I kind of understand, so that if you want to change later, you can. But I guess a question then would be, how much money was left in the Gurney Days Corporation that was turned over to the park, or will be turned over to the Park District?
Will be turned over is approximately about $47,000.
And approximately, how much do you spend on Gurney Days? Do you have a number like that? That's just like seed money to start, right?
Correct, and rainy day funds as well.
Yeah.
I can tell you, last year, we had a loss. Our expenditures were $10,000 more than the previous year. Our revenue was down around $7,000 from the previous year.
So you had more money at the end of the last year than you did.
And we had less money.
But
Our expenditures were up and our revenue was down.
But if you still have money to turn over to the next year, though?
Yes.
So.
We still have money in reserve, yes.
So your reserve the year before would have been more?
Correct.
Okay. So if you changed and decided to charge for some of the bands and things that come if you got bigger names, and then you made a profit on that, what would, I mean, is that part of the intention? Because then I would think that some of the other services that we're providing, like police and fire, then there should be something in the agreement that if you had more money, that you would pay for some of those things.
Or defer to Susie on that. I know she had conversations with Pat.
Yeah, and I mean, if the event grew beyond what it is today and was putting a strain on the police department, that would be something that Chief Smith would bring forward to me, and then I would definitely be having a conversation with the park district that, hey, this has gotten a little beyond what we're used to in previous years, so we're gonna need to figure something out, whether we scale it back or we start charging for some off-duty policing services. I can tell you, this agreement is pretty short and sweet, and when Susie and I originally talked about it, that was my request, that I wanted there to be a separation of who does what, and that's what this agreement focuses on, like Attorney Winter said. I talked to the Park District's business manager today. When the funds are received, they will be coded in such a way, similar to how they handle Fit Nation right now, that when Gurney Days is done, if we want a list of who was paid what, when, and what the dollar amount was, that's a couple of clicks and he can produce that information for us. So they're not gonna be commingled with other funds and start from scratch. They will be segregated via coding in their financial system.
So then the question is for you then, shouldn't that be part of the agreement? Because as long as Susie's there and as long as Christie's there, as long as Pat's there, those are all good agreements. But if somebody else is in that position.
Well, and that's one of the reasons that the agreement's only for 2 years. It can be renewed, it's self-renewing, but if we need to enhance this document, we certainly can do that. And it can be amended even after the first year by both parties. So I think both entities realize that this is a partnership and that this would be the first year without the corporation's involvement. So I think a lot of information will become available, and we are looking forward to the Park District providing the level of detail in terms of actual expenditures. So this is certainly a platform for addressing those issues.
Yeah, and I would keep in mind that if they really were going to start making this profit, you know, the Park District is using their staff and their facilities. Should they get reimbursed? If we're going to get reimbursed, then they should get reimbursed. So is our goal to make enough money for the village and the Park District? Because that's a huge hurdle.
Right.
For a community event to make it so profitable that everybody would get reimbursed. I mean, we should be looking at this as this is something we do for our community, that our community enjoys. Our community obviously wants to come with it. What has changed is we can't get volunteers to operate even the car show. We keep changing vendors because they keep losing money. They're not making money, so.
That was just a hypothetical, you know,
Yeah.
it just feels like.
They may bring in bigger bands and maybe they do charge a cover.
It just feels like that with this agreement, the Park District has a lot more control and that the village has given up. Because basically, we're doing the same thing that we did for Gurney Days Corporation.
Yeah, we were trying to avoid taking on more responsibility.
I see that now.
And the Park District is very good at planning events. They're very efficient. You know, we've been trying to avoid getting into event. Every time we bring up event planning, you know, it's really not our forte. And so sometimes we have grown some things, like what we did with Beer Fest, and now we're trying to hand that off. We may do the same thing with the farmer's market. We grow it, we get it started, and then we hand it off. I mean, we're not really in the event planning business. Not that we haven't talked about hiring somebody to do event planning, but that's a big budget consideration, and the Park District has that already. But the bigger thing is, Gurney Days was not sustainable.
Again, I want to see Gurney Days continue. But I also, my objection is more, again, to accountability. They go out and get more sponsorship. Is the money still going to be there? And are we going to see how it comes out? And if they build that reserve so that they can continue doing it, you know,
We
to,
can work
and
on some
maybe to
amendment
grow or whatever. I just want that we, as
Yeah, no,
also part of it,
I think the park district in the village, no matter what, whether it makes money or not, even if it's losing money, we're still going to put on Gurney Days. This actually takes away that concern of profitability or reserves, because we have the staff, they have the staff, and it becomes part of, as a community event. And just like all the other community events, you just do them. You don't think about, you know, it's just part of your budget, as much as that probably doesn't make, but I mean, we're doing community events already. Now we're just taking on the biggest one there is, because it's just been, the last decade almost has been a struggle every year. And I'm sure that there's some things that'll change, there's some things that'll grow, but the community's changed and what they want and expect, and
Well, as Attorney Winter suggested, I mean, we can work on an amendment with some accounting language in there. It was, the focus of this agreement was responsibilities, who does what. So, I mean, I don't think there was, that language was left out purposely. It just wasn't the focus, so.
Well, I think it's a good agreement. I think it's a good partnership. I just didn't like the way it was worded.
the money.
Well, and just in the responsibility.
We were trying to keep it simple.
I know.
So we didn't lock ourselves in if we wanted to do something different or they wanted to do something. I think there's a lot of new, exciting things that could be done with Gurney Days. Other comments, discussion? All right, do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move.
Motion by trustee O'Brien,
Second.
second by trustee Thorstensen. Roll call, please.
O'Brien.
Aye.
Thomas.
I get it, but I'm going to say no.
Hood.
Yes.
Thorstensen.
Yes.
Ross.
Aye.
Garner.
Aye.
5 ayes, 1 nay.
All right, and then Pat will work with the Park District to set up some kind of amendment so that there's an accounting both from us and the Park District on all expenditures and all revenues that we both can publish for the public so they actually see what's going on. All right, very good. Now back to the really big budget. All right, so we left off.
Yeah, fire.
With
public
fire.
works, so everybody back to the table.
According to this, it's included.
All right, so we'll continue with our budget workshop number 1. This is for fiscal year 2020, 2021, and we were about halfway through, and we left off, and we'll start up with Chief Kavanaugh in the Fire Department.
Okay. Looking at this year, where we're going to end the year, we're predicting that we're going to be just under $100,000 over budget this year. The majority of this has to do with, we've been short-staffed for the last, well, the whole year. We got the SAFER grant, we were able to bring 6 people on. However, due to the way the state of Illinois hiring laws are, we struggled filling those spots for quite a long time. We've actually now, in 18 months, I was looking for Christine, I think she'd go. The HR directors run 3 separate hiring tests for us, and we keep running them. We actually are just establishing a brand-new list again to fill some vacancies. So we've been filling back at overtime rate, so that's why the salary line's way up, and actually the benefit line is down, it's just not down as much. Kind of goes to that. It isn't actually cheaper to pay time and a half to employees than it is for benefit. We actually lost on that one. Going forward next year, as I stated, we're still going to be carrying 3 vacancies, so there is some additional dollars in there for overtime to get the year started with. Besides that, the budget is pretty flat across the board with the exception of the, get my computer to work here, line 43, that is $30,000 up. That's every other year according to state statute. Once again, we have to do promotional testing. We have to keep an eligibility list. So this will come on this year. We run an entire test according to the statute. Then next year it'll fall off and it'll come back. So this is an on-off budget, and this is an on year for us. As we go into things that we've accomplished in 1920 budget year, we started out the year placing the fourth ambulance in service. We bought a fifth one, along with the safer hires. It's the first time that we were able to staff 4 ambulances 24/7, 365. As most of you have seen over the year, we actually set a record for the number of calls we ran this year. So it was pretty much a perfect time, a perfect storm. We ran over 7,100 emergencies. We've never been, out of the 6,000s before. So it was perfect timing for this to come on board. It was in a good place. Some of the other accomplishments, we received a 90-10 grant this year from FEMA. We were able to put 2 brand-new battery-operated extrication tools in service. We were able to put them on our ladder truck and our heavy rescue. This is really going to come into play when we build out Station 3, when we start running the ladder truck out of there as a primary engine. It's going to have the extrication equipment. It's already advanced life support. It's got the fire suppression equipment. So this is really adding nice to our fleet, and it's going to play right into our plan as we open up Station 3. We additionally this year, besides hiring the 6 safer people, we had a couple of planned retirements, so we brought 8 personnel on. A lot of training this year. It was an exciting year, but it was a very busy year. The amount of hours you spent bringing people up to speed, getting them ready so they can ride on the ambulance and ride on the engine safely and provide the level of service our citizens expect. So it was a steady year. Another thing we accomplished this year, we actually brought all of our fire inspections up to electronic. It's something that, since I've taken over as chief, we're moving away from papers more and more. This was a big accomplishment. The IS department helped us with this. We deployed iPads to the fire inspectors. They're able to go out in the field. They actually work on it. They do it, and then the report's emailed. We've had very good feedback from everyone out there. All the business community really likes it. The nice part about it is we can send it to the manager, but probably the biggest thing is we found out when we get the home office email address and it goes back there, we're actually seeing violations fixed quicker than we ever have before. We started last month putting that in our monthly stats to you, the reports, as we were building this out so you can see as this program goes out and follow it. Probably the most exciting thing that you did for, as far as we're concerned, was over this last year you hired an architect and you brought a construction manager on board to start designing Fire Station 3. We're in that preliminary part of Station 3 right now. We're right on the timeline that we proposed going back just over a year ago. We're looking at letting the bids come this May. We're hoping to break ground July or August, and then we'll be under roof before the winter season. They'll work throughout the winter. Next summer, August, September of 21, the station should open. So we're right on time. We're early on still in the drawings. The budget's definitely, as Brian's mentioned, I think 11 hash marks. We have 11 times. The budget's in place for it. The fire district's set up. They, stepped up to the plate with their $2 million towards this. Really going to make it a successful project. So something I think we can be proud of for the community. Other things that we're planning on doing, I already mentioned that we'll have the promotional testing come next year. We're going to let the bids for construction. We still have 3 vacancies. You've seen we've done some promotions over the last month, a couple months here. Very exciting time for the fire department. We've got some new supervision, some new leadership. It's going real well, but without that list to hire someone in place, we have 3 vacancies. We see that list coming out in May, as I stated. Probably get the hires in June, July, get them up to speed, and we'll get going there. So the other thing we did this year is we applied for another federal grant. This one is to replace the 5 cardiac monitors, the AEDs on the ambulances. Last time we replaced these was 2012. We're very fortunate in 2012 to get a federal grant to pay for this. We're hoping we're kind of going to that well again. We updated the grant. We're working on some things. The prices on these has gone up significantly in the last 5 years. They've literally turned into little computers. Chris actually has them hooked up where they Bluetooth and they Wi-Fi and they talk to the systems and everything over my head, but once again, it's all part of the electronic patient care reporting. The monitor reports directly to it, and actually data's transferred back and forth. It really saves a lot of time out in the field, which is making runs more, the statistics are more, what do I want to say, accurate, as well as timeliness. So a big success for us. So a lot of exciting projects coming. Station 3's kind of taking a lot of it. The battalion chiefs and myself will start next year working on our exact response modules. We've already talked with communications. They're aware this project's coming down the line, so we're gonna have to build out new response modules and rework head and all those different parts. So we're excited about that. It's a great challenge. I think everyone, when you become a fire chief or a battalion chief, those are the things you kind of dream of doing. So we thank you for that project and we look forward to it. So, any questions?
Not to throw any water on the fire, but we still have to sow up the land. So we have, hopefully have that done.
Just right away, some right away.
Hopefully we'll have that done this month, but let's not count our chickens before they're hacked. All right, I have a question, but I'll let the trustees go first. Jeannie?
In the process, if we're starting the building as you're indicating, when is the light supposed to go in then, as far as moving, you know, so that trucks going in and out or whatever during, is there any kind of a timeline on that at the same time or not?
We are currently working with the state of Illinois, who approved the grant for the light. We've got our paperwork submitted. We're still working with the office staff to make sure the grant's in place completely, before we move on to legislators to see when we can actually get it funded. However, we're working on it. There is dollars in the capital budget at the state level. It's there. However,
We're working with the
we're
state.
working right now with them. Yes. the state.
Never mind.
We have our application in for
Yeah,
the
no,
light.
state.
Yeah,
Never
I know.
mind. I get it.
yeah.
I worked with the state, so I know. Never mind.
So David's kind of handling the permit for the light. All right.
So we have, if you don't mind, so we've put in the application to get the permit or the warrant to put the light in. So the two different departments at the state, one has given us the money, the other needs to approve it being built.
I get it.
It's like threading the needle.
I get it.
Any other questions? All right. And I know the answer, but I just want to hear it again. We have had huge success with lateral hires in the police department. It allows us to hire someone and have them productive and adding value much quicker. Have we thought about lateral hires for the fire department?
Currently, the way the state law in the fire side is, there's actually a hiring bill that's in place. We have to follow state statute when we hire. The police do not have the same bill, same law in place. So we have a law that we're following. That being said, I am following departments that I'm seeing trying to move back towards lateral hiring, so other people are testing that water right now. I've got feelers out there, I'm watching it, I'm seeing how it's going and if it's challenged or not. Because when you read the law, it's pretty clear that we have to follow a hiring process that's laid out in there. However, there are people that are actually out maybe going a different direction, so I'm watching how that
Within our
plays.
state that are,
Within our state that are not necessarily doing what I believe the law says, and I'm waiting to see how that plays. I've got 3 departments I'm watching right now to see how it turns out.
so they could be challenged.
I would be surprised they're not challenged.
Union. So why is it different on the fire department side than the police department side? I mean, why is the state legislation different?
I would think that the union, the fire union might be a stronger union at the state level and got this law passed when they wanted. This goes back to 2008 when there was a fair amount of layoffs of firefighters throughout the state when economic times got hard. One of the things they did was they went out, they passed a new legislation where they were gonna create statewide lists because there was actually look for layoffs to be hired back first in other municipalities. Well, the times changed, they never finished the second half of this state list, you're still allowed to run a local list if you want. That's the way we've been doing it and continue to do it. And it's kind of gone to the wayside. Now, that being said, a active firefighter has no limitations to come to another fire department, but it's pretty clear that they have to come in at a new hire's position. They can't come over as a lateral position.
So we could hire an experienced firefighter, we just have to start him at the lowest
The
pay
majority of
grade.
the firefighters that come work for us and take our positions have 3 to 5 years experience someone else, and we're a move up for them. Most of our firefighters have experience of some sort. We require them to be firefighter and paramedics as they're taking our tests, so they've got that training somewhere else. So where if we didn't require that, we wouldn't see the firefighter for a year and a half, 2 years being able to be on a vehicle. We're able to get them trained in about 3 months about 3 months, that we're able to bring people in that have experience because people want to work in Gurnee.
So we're basically hiring a lateral, but they have to go through the process, get on the list, and we have to go through 1, 2, 3.
And we did this last time around now. We've been averaging 16 to 17 people on our list. We did go back and work with Civil Service, along with Christine. We've gone to a different testing network this time, and I say testing network in that we used to host a written test. They would come to our facility, take the test on a certain date. We're using testing centers this time, and we gave them about 2-month window. They could go to a testing center that ended on the 28th. We will have about 48 interviews this time, where we've been
Wow, okay.
averaging 16. And the candidate pool's much different than what it has been in an exciting way, so more to come on that. So
All
I
right,
think
well,
we've done
that's
some things.
positive, because, okay. It just seems we need to hire quickly when we have 3 openings. So.
Yes.
All right, other questions on the fire department budget? All right, well, these are major leaps for us with another fire station. All right,
So on the Public
Works.
So on the Public Works side, we are at full staff. And a year ago, we did a succession plan that we have done for the last 3 years. And the young lady to my left was hired as our Assistant Public Works Director, Village Engineer, who has tremendously done a great job, not only on the engineering side, but also on Public Works. My staff, when she walked in, actually adapted to her very well, and she is doing a great job. So just wanted to put that out there. I won't go through this slide because Brian has gone through this mostly already, but most of the initiatives that Public Works has done, and since I've been here for the last 11 years, is our snow and ice control plan is one of the biggest things that we have put together when I walked in the door. And again, we do that every year, but this coming year, it'll be revamped and rechanged. And that means that we will eliminate trucks because our trucks are better suited, that we will kind of condense some of the routes that we are out there. It won't affect operation, but it will kind of more efficient how we're doing our operation. So that's something that we do every year. In this past year, just as of now, we have responded to 16 snow events. This is one of the mildest winters we've had in quite a while, probably in the last 3 years. We've only used about 2,300 ton of salt, which is roughly about our average over the last 11 years has been around the 2,600 ton per year. Our liquids are actually going up. We've used about 2,500 gallons of liquid, which is what we did when we first started. Our snow and ice control plan changes every year. Our staff changes, our drivers change, our routes change. Our equipment has changed. It has come full circle. We are probably, when we get to fleet services, we are probably about a year or 2 away to completing the whole fleet. So it'll take us roughly around the 13-year mark to get us all completed out. In that time, though, we have eliminated vehicles. We have did 2-for-1s. We have gotten rid of vehicles and kind of condensed what we were doing. So also on that, our initiatives for this year, we replaced 193 LED streetlights. We are in the final year. Next year will be our final year of replacing all of our streetlights to LED, along with Commonwealth Edison. If you remember last year, they came in and also changed some of theirs. They have probably about 40 lights left to change, which hopefully they'll get in this next fiscal year. We've done the last year of our traffic control sign inspection, so that's the whole entire village is done. So we have done 645 inspections on the last leg of this, with 540 of those traffic signs being done. So that is completely done. So that's every stop signs, speed limit sign, everything has been gone through in the village over the last 6 years. So now, going in the next year, we will start doing nightly inspections, which that means we need to kind of look at the reflectivity of the signage at night, so that is completely done. The material we use on these signs is from 3M. It's called DG Cube. It's a sign material that can stay out there for 15-plus years. If that sign fails, usually 3M will replace that material and that sign. So those are all in DG Cube. There's the highest grade of material we have on those signs as well. We continue with our ash tree program. We are just under 2,000 ash trees left in the community, down from about 3,300 back in 2011. We treated 948 of those ash trees. This is a 2-year program. Every other year we change. Actually, every other year we treat. We had 105 removals of ash trees this year, and we replanted 138 trees this year. And some of those trees were along Almond Road when we did the Jawa Main, so I think we had 29 trees that had gone in that area there. Also, we're doing a village-wide storm sewer inspection and repair, which we completed 60 of those, and those we do this time of year in the winter. So we kind of play that through with snow and ice control. So our initiatives for next year, as I said, we're going to revise and revamp our snow and ice control plan, which we do every year. Our final year of our LEG program will go into place, so we'll have completed all of our streetlights at the end of next year. EAB treatments will continue as well, and so will our storm sewer inspections as well continue. So.
This slide is just to show you where previously the
Wait,
public
Sorry,
works.
Miss
Can I
Jeannie.
just ask,
Sorry.
sorry to interrupt you, Brian. We are still doing the beet juice
Yes.
thing?
Yes.
I,
It's called Beat Heat, is what we use now, yes.
yeah, but we go out prior, we continue to go
No.
out prior to it? Because I
No,
didn't notice it as much this year.
No, actually, the industry is kind of moving away from that because they're finding out that most places are treating their salt prior to putting it on trucks. So they're taking the beet juice and treating the salt, and they put it on the truck, and then they pre-treat the salt once it comes off the truck. And they're finding that that works better, if you will, than to put the anti-icing, if you will, on the
Okay,
roadways.
I wondered about that because I
Yeah.
hadn't noticed it.
Where the anti-icing has been more effective for the county level and village levels is on bridge decks, when you get the frosting, early morning frost and stuff like that. I do know Warren Township still does it, and I speak with Amy quite frequently, and she's probably at that bubble where she's gonna kind of walk away from that. I know county still does it on a lot of their shaded areas, like through S-curves, on their bridge decks and things like that, but they're even talking about kind of moving away from that as well, so.
And just when I noticed like in our latest keeping posted, we still have the tree offer for parkways and that. Do we get a good participation from that, or?
Who's managing the program? You still?
We are, I think last year was our biggest program, and I'm guessing we had a dozen, maybe 13 trees, something like that. And that's probably been the biggest. We've usually been in like the 6 to 7 kind of range. What we have been telling people as the trees are being removed, if they want a guaranteed tree, the 50/50 program will get you a guaranteed tree. And I think that's what's happening, is a lot of the people want that tree now.
Okay.
And in the spring, you can't get these trees in the fall, I think, so they're able to pick their own tree and work with the arborist to say if that tree meets their criteria to put there and so on. But I think we did have 12 or 13 last year. That's
Okay.
probably the
I was
biggest
just
we've had.
wondering, I always meant to ask, and
Yeah.
it came to me tonight, so, thank you.
I have a question.
Trustee Garner?
In
Right.
terms of the treated ash trees, what percentage of them are surviving? And if they survive, what's the chance that they'll be reinfected again?
I will tell you that we started treating ash trees in April of 2011, because we found the emerald ash borer in town in January. We will never eradicate the emerald ash borer. We can hold it, but every ash tree in this village will be replaced at any given time. So, I can't give you a percentage because I don't know that, but we will lose every ash tree. If we stop treating, them emerald ash borers will come back, and whatever's in the tree will kill them, no matter what.
So are we simply slowing it down so that we can replace the trees?
Correct.
Is that the plan?
Correct. That was our whole thought process when we began, is to kind of slow the spread of it. And so we didn't have this, we had to come out and spend $2 million to replace all park trees or to go through and decimate a neighborhood. So we decided to treat it and kind of slow the process a little bit, so we can kind of get ahead of it and kind of put a variety of different trees in the community, so we had them.
And what's the cost of treatment
That I
in
couldn't,
general?
no, I couldn't even begin to tell you the truth, because we buy it in bulk at the beginning of the year. I can get you those numbers.
Sure.
I'll talk to the arborist tomorrow, and I
Yeah, I'd
can
be
shoot you an
interested.
email. I'll shoot everybody an email so we can get you those costs.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, fleet.
So this slide is just to show you where the fleet services previously resided in the general fund here. Obviously, the 2021 budget is zero, and this represented basically just labor and some parts. Most everything else was charged out to fuel, and parts were charged out to the different departments. So this isn't the only thing that was combined into the fleet services, but it's the main operations piece. So that is now in the new fleet services fund. Again, transfers in here for operations, fuel, and parts, vehicle replacements with the exception of fire, and then just the red box to show that it does operate on a cost reimbursement basis. Revenues, which means revenues equals expenditures every year, should net to zero. The only difference here between what we're charging back to departments and the expenses in the fund is $15,000 that we charge for outside agencies to use fuel, basically. So that charge for service stays within the fund. Fleet services fund here, so this shows us kind of how the transfers worked. So transferring from, if you look on kind of the left side there, the general fund to the fleet services fund, the capital improvement fund to the fleet services fund, water and sewer operating capital to the fleet services fund. Again, it's built on 4 different pieces based on a 5-year rolling average for operations, parts, fuel, and then the current year's replacement of vehicles. So just to show you kind of how that's built and charged back to the departments there. I think, Tom, you want to take this one?
Yeah, so from a Public Works and a Fleet Services side, we'd like to thank all the departments for sending their money to us so we can spend it for you. So, for Fleet Services for last year, we replaced 4 police squad cars, 2 large snowplow trucks in Public Works, and then 2 Public Works pickup trucks. We continue and have been since 2010 working with computerized fleet analysis, which is CFA, with data analysis and controlling repair costs of tracking repair costs, labor costs, parts, and preventive maintenance measures, which is what Brian is using for Fleet Services. For fiscal year 21, we have in the budget for replacement of 5 police squad cars, 2 detective cars, 2 large Public Works trucks, our Public Works loader, and a Public Works mini excavator. And we will continue to use CFA going forward to get those numbers for Fleet Services as well.
Moving into the water and sewer operating fund here, just point out revenues almost 9.4 million for next year, expenditures 8.2. So you see a positive variance on this side of about 1.2 million. When we get to the capital side, you'll see that the capital side operates at a deficit, so that's why we combine these two. We have the final rate adjustment that we put in place I guess this will be the 5th year, so 5 years ago. Will happen May 1st, and then we'll be talking about rates in the future of water rates and capital and what all that looks like probably later in the summer, early fall. As I mentioned before, we have the first of 2 Java rate drops that we are capturing to fund capital, have a sustainable pay-as-you-go capital plan moving forward. And then this year, the IEPA loan debt service comes on. You see that at the second line from the bottom there. Moving to the capital side, again, these two are combined. You can see there's 3.4 million deficit here. Again, that's the 2.2. Again, we have a large water main project this year, Old Grand and Waveland. And then at the bottom there, that 248,000 is the transfer to fleet services for Public Works, utility, equipment, and vehicles. Just a couple notes. Well, we talked about most of this already. $2.5 million is about 30% of operating expenditures. That's what we anticipate the fund balance ending. Part of that, drawing that down, is the village's portion of the Knowles Road Tower, so we didn't take that full amount. Talked about the Old Grand Water Main this year. Just a couple notes about, you can see how the Jawa rate drops. And we saw this coming, again, 5 years ahead of time, so we were able to anticipate. And Jawa actually stuck to their financial forecast, which was nice to see. But the rate goes from 283 to 229 to 182, and again, we could capture that that we didn't previously have in our rate for capital. Also included in the budget is $350 for a meter exchange program, and then we talked about the debt service being on there for the first time on the IEP side.
So for water and sewer, we've had a pretty busy year. We have been in the last 4 years replacing obsolete fire hydrants. So this year, the division replaced 18 obsolete fire hydrants. We inspected, and this is something that's an ongoing program. All of the main water line valves in town have never been exercised or looked. So the crew has been replacing them. This is year 2, and we inspected 121 water distribution mainline valves, and repairs were performed on all of them. We have done SCADA upgrades. I think Chris talked about this earlier, to Route 41, our Merritt Club, Lee Avenue, and Osprey Lakes, and that's to get all of that data onto our SCADA system so we can watch those lift stations function if we have an issue with them. This year, we had a backup generator installed at Crescent Avenue Lift Station. We have a backup generator being installed at Northwestern Water Tower. And then we completed the 7 Terry Road reservoir rehab. That is the same program we put our towers on back in 2010 till present. So we have Northwestern, Heather Ridge, Pembroke, and now our reservoir is on that same maintenance program. They just finished that project. Unfortunately, we have a little problem with that. When they came in and sandblasted the inside, we kind of have a leak somewhere around the main pipe coming in the reservoir, so it's been redrained. And Suez, who our company is working on fixing that right now. So once that's repaired, they will kind of refill that and go through the process to get that tank back up and in service. For 2011 initiative, we are going to enter year 5 of the hydrant replacement program, which is a continual program. We will continue year 3 in the main line valve exercise and inspection program. We will put our last 3 lift stations, Martins, Westgate, and Route 21, on SCADA for next year. We will be putting a backup generator at Heather Ridge. We will be putting a backup generator at Westgate Lift Station, and then we are starting our Orion changeout program, which Brian talked about just a little while ago. So.
All right, get into kind of the smaller funds now. 911 fund. Here, this is set up as a pass-through for the new JETSB fund that we had a couple years ago. This was where we had previously run these expenditures through. However, with the combining of the setup of the joint ETSB, this just acts as a pass-through with that. Fund balance is always at 0. Again, expenditures about $540,000. We expect to run through JETSB next year. On the Gurnee side for the communication center, a couple of items included in there: fire radios, a Knowles Tower receiver site, a 3rd backup, and then a couple changes that the board approved when they looked at the JETSB board approved when they looked at the budget that I have to include in here for the final, but they're pretty minor, and it'll net to zero anyway. That's just what that last item is. Looking at the motor fuel tax fund, again here we anticipate $900,000 in revenue, no expenditures next year. Utilize this every other year. There is that potential for an additional $500,000 depending on what happens at the state level with the transportation renewal fund and what they decide to charge to that as far as administrative expenses go. Again, we didn't include any of that in here. So if it comes in, it'll just be additional funding for next year's road program. The impact fee fund, this is where impact fees came in when a lot of development was happening in the community. We've been drawing this down over time, probably by, say, net of $500,000, maybe over the last 5 years. Again, we transfer this to offset the stormwater management sidewalk program in the capital funds. $350,000 this year. You can see it's been anywhere from $250 to $400, $200 this year, and then $350 budgeted for next year. PD Restricted Revenue Fund, this fund is used to house seizures, local, state, and federal seizures. Those monies are restricted as to how they can be used. They all have different actually restrictions on them, so it's important that we separate those within this fund. At some point, we will build up enough fund balance in here to be able to use this for some equipment. We did have a couple more significant seizures this year, so part of the discussion going into the final is there things in the police operating budget or the capital budget that we can, maybe charge to here, and we'll have that discussion internally, but you may see some expenditures move from the general fund to here. Obviously, this is restricted money. We can only spend it on certain things, so why not spend it? Capital Improvement Fund here, obviously this is the non-water and sewer side of the village's capital plan. Street, sidewalk, stormwater management, buildings come out of here, Fire Station 3 comes out of here. Transfer to fleet services for public works, streets, and PD vehicles from this fund to the fleet services fund also. Again, we'll talk about all this in more detail when we get to the capital section of the plan, or of the budget, excuse me. Bond fund, nice to see zeros here. We don't have any debt service next year as far as general outstanding bonds, so we paid those off early this year with surpluses, so no activity here next year. The Hickory Haven SSA number 2 fund, this is for the Hickory Haven SSA utility extension bonds. This is the last year, this upcoming year, fiscal year 21 is the last year of that. Those are expired for that. Golf course fund here, we got some activity in here for the first time in a little while. On the revenue side, $291,500. $250,000 transfer from the capital fund, again, to address those more immediate capital needs that we haven't over the last few years, or many years. Also, moving forward, to keep a sustainable capital program in here, we are taking the amusement tax generated at the course and then putting it back in this fund for future capital items. As a result of that, all future major capital items that aren't absorbed in Golf Vision's budget, that they can do through their general operating revenue and offset with that, will run through this fund and come before the village board for approval. So we have some control over what happens when it comes to those revenues, those monies, and major capital out there. 235 on the expenditure side. We may adjust that up based on some final bid numbers that came in. I think we had to add 10,000 to it or something at some point, but so that may adjust up just a touch. Police pension fund, 7.1 million here in revenues, 3.3 in expenditures. Again, on the revenue side, we budgeted investment income at 7% because that's the actuarial assumption. So fund's still in a strong place, adding 3.8 million, or roughly 3.8 million to net assets, assuming everything comes in okay. On the employer side, employer contribution is about 2.4 million. That increased to 125,000, or 5.5% over last year. The employees kick in about 780,000, and then investment income accounts for the remaining 3.9. Funded ratio here, both of our police and fire pension fund are well funded. Police side at 72.1, and then we'll get to the fire here in a minute. That's well over, that's over 74% actually. Fire side, 5.5 million in revenues, just over 2.1 million in expenditures. Again, strong position, still adding to net assets, 3.4 million, assuming that investment returns come in at 7%. Employer contributions, almost $2 million. That went up 97,000 over last year, about 5.2%. The employees kick in 630,000, and then investment income at 2.9 million here. Again, funded ratio 74.8, so well-funded plans. Again, just to point out the consolidation, the pension consolidation. We have 30 months from January 1st before we have to do anything, so this will unravel over the next couple of years. I understand on both the police and the fire side, they have transition boards in place now, and they actually both had at least one meeting. So they are moving, and the transition board will kind of pave the way, set the rules for the permanent board that'll come in place 12 months after that. So by this time next year, we should have at least one meeting of the permanent board and have some direction on where those things are going. ETSB fund here, so this is the joint ETSB with the City of Zion and Village of Gurnee and the City of Zion. Just a couple capital things to point out here. We had some large capital purchases last year, as well as being new to this kind of arrangement. I think we finally honed in on what expenditures are out there, and especially from a maintenance standpoint, software maintenance, things like that. Again, funded in here is a third backup at the police station. I think they're still working out what that's going to look like ultimately in the final form. Fire radios, and Chris, if you want to jump in here at any point, because you know way more about this than I do, but fire radios, the Knowles receiver site, and then Zion has some requests this year to partially offset their Blackboard Connect system, Starcom radios that Chris mentioned earlier, and some mobile data computers, and then some cameras at their fire stations, so.
Yeah, far and away, the big expenditure is on the Zion side is the Starcom radios for police, where there's a cost-sharing agreement where the ETSB is doing the base radios and all the accessories, battery and all that, batteries and things that go with it are on Zion's side of the ledger. And then the other things are to keep their operations parallel with the things we've done. We did all our police MDCs in 1 year. Theirs are spread out on a rotating replacement program. So it's very corresponding between the two in regards to that. The big nut with that is definitely the Starcom radios.
And one of the things from the beginning of setting up this board that we planned for financially is at some point the CAD system needing to be replaced. So we've had that on our radar for the last few years since this thing's come up, since the ETSB has been formed. So that's, we've planned for it, saved it, and when that time comes ready, we'll be ready to have funding for that expenditure, so. That really gets us through section 6 in the financials, so really the only thing we have left is kind of the capital program here, so if there's any questions left on financials, or we can start right into capital.
All right, going from administration all the way through Public Works, good presentation. Questions? Trustee O'Brien?
I just had one question about the Public Works and the cemetery water tower. I had one earlier question which was answered sufficiently, but how much did the 1.5 million gallons of water that we had to drain cost the village?
Well, you push that into the system, right?
Yeah, we pushed it into the system.
So it didn't go to
We
waste?
sold that to residents.
Yeah, we pushed
Thank
it,
you.
yeah.
We didn't just open it up and,
Yeah, we don't
we're
just-
good.
We're smarter than that.
But the leak we caught before it added
Yes.
up significantly. We've learned our lesson on there. Trustee Garner?
How many fire hydrants do we have in the village? Just a ballpark.
5,200, I think.
Are you kidding me?
5,292.
Right to you.
Yeah, I thought we had 5,000, because just from the
Yeah,
five-year
5290
replacement.
5,292, I think.
Okay, and how long does a fire hydrant last before it has to be replaced?
Well, the ones we're replacing are anything older than 1970 right now.
So they last a long time.
Yeah.
And, had another question. And how much does a fire hydrant cost? I just want to know.
I think anywhere from $750 to $1,200, and that depends on the depth of the hydrant. So if you have so you measure from the bottom of the hydrant down to the main, so if it's 4 foot or 5 foot, it could be $750. If you have to go 8 foot or higher, it just goes by length.
So it's longer than what we see above ground?
Oh, yeah, by far, yeah.
Just curious.
In the admin memo, if you saw it, on the last page, there was a fire hydrant that was hit in, I believe it was Heather Ridge, that snapped, the car hit the hydrant, but it snapped it at the main and actually blew water up in the air, so it's in the admin memo if you saw the picture, yeah.
Yeah.
Usually they don't do that, they usually snap right at ground
Right at
level,
the
but
top,
that one
right.
is, yeah, for some reason, so. Yeah, they go, I think our deepest main, I think it's 12 foot, I believe. So it's 12 foot and under from that point.
All right, we're ready for the big one, capital.
Moving right into capital, not a whole lot here has changed since the multi-year plan presentation. Total budget, again, just under 16 million, a lot of that's Fire Station 3, John. Capital Improvement Fund is about 11.4 million of that. Water and sewer capital, about just under 3.3 million. Fleet services, which is new, which would reduce what happens in the other two funds from vehicles and equipment standpoint, just over $1 million. And then the golf course, for the first time, we added 235,000, and then, again, nothing in motor fuel tax until next year. Looking at the total proposed budget broken down by plan, obviously transportation system is the big one, 5.4 million, followed by buildings. Buildings typically is not 5 million, but I won't say it again. New fire station, water and sewer system, $3 million there. Again, the big chunk of that is going to be the Old Main, water main project there. Vehicles and equipment, 1.4. Stormwater management, 580,000. And then what we did with the budget that we didn't have for the multi-year capital plan was we separated out technology. Obviously, one of the strategic goals of the village is to stay updated on technology. It's something we place an emphasis on all the time. I mean, we've implemented so many different technologies over the last, number of years here to make life more efficient and deliver services to the residents more efficiently, that we thought it made sense to call it out and show the actual investment that the village is making every year. So we called that out separately. Budget's almost 522,000 next year. Transportation system here just wanted to point out that there's no MFT spending here, and it's almost 5.4 million, and Heather can go into the individual projects that make up that 5.4 million.
So for next year, here's a list of the roads that are currently on the plan. We go out and assess based on the pavement condition index. We had the evaluation done last year, and so we use that to help guide our principals for the following year. I don't know if you want to get into any of the details. Next, we have the pedestrian traffic, right? So there's the Blue Ribbon Committee items that we want to try and make a priority, but this year we had a unique opportunity in that the Stern School Road Bridge over the tollway was moving forward, and so we brought before the board earlier in the year whether we wanted to extend a carriage walk on the south side of the road. We were given direction to go ahead and proceed with that, so that's what item A is. Item B on the left is the Knowles Road path. We're just pushing it off a year because this year we put a lot of money into we're going to be putting a lot of money into the sidewalk on the south side of Stearns. And next we have the streetlight upgrades that Tom mentioned earlier. So those are the subdivisions where we'll be putting those in. Each red dot represents one of those LED light upgrades.
Stormwater management system, again, 580,000 total here. 430 for drainage improvements that Heather will talk about more in a minute, and then 150 for land acquisition.
So here we have where we're intending to do some televising work for our storm sewer. Storm sewer concrete pipes have a lifespan over 30 to 50 years. Sometimes they'll say 100, but I don't believe that. So we put cameras in the pipes to actually verify that joints haven't separated in advance of pipes breaking down. This is the area we intend on focusing on based on input from my staff. And if there's other areas that pop up, we'll have a contract in place that we can dispatch somebody out to.
I think the big expenditure was culvert work, and I forget
The major one is the culvert work at Waveland that we're combining with the water main project so that we dig it up once and do it all as one contract so we can leverage the fact that they're mobilized already. Yes, that's true.
And Heather, the Providence Village, instead of us going through and fixing what the original plan was, we're going, sorry, don't make me flash everybody. I can't see up here. We don't have a light. We're going to get access to do the tiles in the farmland.
We're working to get access, so just north of the tree line, we'll put in an open ditch and some piping where we can't get ditching in to convey the water from, I think that goes from east to west, to get it to go around the subdivision and up to the north where it right now drains through the subdivision.
Which negates all of that going in and clearing out all that landscaping and the sheds that have been put in where we,
And we have that budgeted in this year. We have that budgeted actually in the current year.
You mentioned before, I just wanted to make sure that that was, okay. Providence Village should be happy. All right.
Buildings and building improvements here, total budget of $5 million. We know what the majority of that is. And in administration, we have $55,000 for a monopole on Cemetery Road there. That's split with the Water and Sewer Fund. Some exterior improvements to Mother Rudd and Police Department. They have some Interior improvements that actually Chief Smith talked about earlier. Fire department, other than the big one, has $60,000 for some parking lot work. We're going to do that over 2 years out back at Station 2. And then just some general maintenance, and then at Public Works, the big one is some floor drains and resurfacing a portion of that lot as well. Looking at water and sewer system here, again, $3 million, and I'll let Heather talk about the details behind what that entails, but the majority of it's utility improvements with a little bit, $400,000 left to run out the Knowles Road project that the village will be taking from fund balance, and then some SCADA work and some consulting numbers, but, sorry, Heather, go
So
ahead.
first and foremost, we have the Old Grand water main replacement, which I know everybody in engineering and Public Works is excited to hear, as well as the businesses along that stretch. So that's $1 million that we've set aside for that project. We'll be going out to bid here soon for it, so keep your eyes peeled. $550,000 water main replacement is then budgeted for Waveland, which is highlighted as B to the right of the railroad tracks there. $540,000 for Wells Lift Station water tower enhancement, so that's supposed to help prevent breakdown from being in hot soils or just a steel can sitting in the ground for years and years on end. $400,000, as Brian mentioned, to finish up the water tower. $260,000 for engineering and televising work, again, to look at the sanitary instead of the storm. It's a lot more corrosive, it gets a lot more beat up, it needs to be looked at. And then $225,000 for SCADA, and $40,000 for a new generator at Lee Avenue Lift Station.
Let me ask, on the SCADA system, overall, what do you think our investment has been from the village just for the SCADA for water and sewage, just ballpark?
Chris is probably better.
Well, I couldn't answer that.
So you've had 2 phases of that. You had the initial one, which was all lights, buttons, and paper tapes with pens. So we went through that phase. Then we went to the computerized PLC, all that for where we sit right now. And that's a good number of years into it at this point. If I had to pull a number out of the air, I would say over that's probably going back 25 years, probably 1.2 million, something like that, $1 million?
Wow.
Something like that.
But it
Range for that?
monitors 24 hours. But it doesn't do the water quality testing, that's still done
Correct.
manually, where we go out and collect sample, okay.
Yeah, we can
So it's really just pressure?
Yeah, we can modify that system anywhere. So our supervisor or our waterworks operator on high demand, he can manipulate the system to put pressures and so on
Where
and
we
so
need
forth.
it, okay.
Yes. Yeah, we still have to take our monthly samples, which are 26 we do monthly per IEPA, and we monitor those.
All right.
Yes.
So we don't use, I just want to make sure what the investment was, but that we're not using SCADA for water quality, that's still done manually.
And then
Okay.
Java still does all of theirs from their
Yeah.
public account. Yes, correct.
Okay.
We will be taking the daily water readings at the Almond Road Reservoir to get daily water consumption and residual chlorine. So it populates a spreadsheet that eventually goes to the EPA, in addition to the tests that Tom mentioned.
SCADA is really good at measuring, and it's really good at control. But what it measures are water flow and things like that, not water quality.
Not quality,
Fair to
okay.
say.
All right. All right.
Vehicles and equipment this year, total $1.4 million. And again, I think we mentioned a bunch of these already, but in the police department, 5 squads, 2 detective vehicles. In the fire department, they had the 90-10 grant for the cardiac monitors. They have 1 command vehicle in there, and some body armor and some standard siren and preemption system maintenance that they include in their budget every year. And then Public Works, Tom mentioned this earlier, 2 5-yard dump trucks, replacement of a loader, replacement of a compact excavator, and then a generator for the shop truck. Those are split, those last 3 are split, actually all of them are split between the 131 Capital Improvement Fund and then water and sewer capital. And then technology that we split out this year, total budget here is $521,000. And I will give Chris his due here and let him talk about
Well, I
the
think,
new category.
yeah, from a big picture point of view, we had a handful of accounts that, capital accounts we used in the past. Everything was kind of lumped into one of those categories. So the big change here is to start to break those out, make them more attributable to departments when appropriate. And I think we've pulled some of the things that were operating budget capital items into this technology fund. So it starts to give you that number more in aggregate. So when you look at the old years, it was only part of what we spent from a capital outlay point of view. And now this is bringing us more to one number that you can look at that includes basically everything outside of maintenance and personnel, and really the dollars outlaid for new equipment, new systems, things like that, and help categorize them better. I don't think our descriptions for all the accounts are perfect yet. They'll be perfect next year, but we had to get through this transition period and try and enumerate those better. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think the descriptions actually come a long way, and I think they represent what's important. Departmental software and apps, cybersecurity, I think we're placing an emphasis through having those accounts set up on what's kind of important to current environment, so. Still a work in progress, but we're getting a lot farther than we were.
Right. But I think it's good to be able to see that number in aggregate, track that history. If there's questions about any of the individual line items in there, we can talk about that. Some of the important ones are, we mentioned that change in the firewall so that we can do inspection of encrypted traffic. That's a good sized number that's in here. And then the other one I think I would point out would be there's a storage number in here that we accomplished this year. So we got that knocked out based on where we're at. So we'll have a little bit of savings over this total number based on that.
Slide I've been waiting.
Jeannie?
Just going back under this new fleet,
Fleet services?
the purchasing of the new vehicles, is that still within each department as a shared, as far as input and that? I mean, do you go out to bid on vehicles? I mean, like, into consideration, the police, what their preference is for vehicles, as well as like the trucks and that?
Yeah, so what we did was part of the pre-budget meetings is we met with Craig, the fleet manager, and went over numbers and vehicles that were in need of replacement, and then what the ask was, what our needs were in return. That meeting then followed up with another meeting with Pat and Brian. And so, yeah, so that, at least from the police standpoint, we had a number of meetings where we talked about needs and wants.
And then it's still the bid process as to who gives us the best rates and that.
So with computerized fleet analysis, CFA, which is our software program in fleet, we can track all of those vehicles. And probably about 5 years ago, we put all of the vehicles in a spreadsheet, and they're actually all by year when they're replaced. And Brian is correct. We meet with all the departments and figure out what their needs are. And then which vehicles are up to be replaced. Craig will look at those vehicles through CFA. And he will determine whether that vehicle goes or stays or can be moved down into, take a squad car, move down to community development or engineering. So we have that tracking all the way through. So every year when we come to capital, we know which vehicles are up for replacement, unless PD changes something on a squad car. For example, if they add another K-9 vehicle, if they add another ET vehicle, evidence technician vehicle, or if they need to add something, then we have to figure out how we're going to pull that vehicle in, whether we add a vehicle or replace a patrol car kind of thing.
And has that, you started documenting the repairs and that, so that now also tells you, like, this vehicle needs to go versus?
Yes, so we track history from the minute that vehicle gets delivered and it's inspected by fleet and it's turned over to PD or Public Works. Once that vehicle's inspected and ready to go, it is put in the system and it is tracked. Everything that is done, that vehicle's touched, is tracked till the day we get rid of it. It can tell us if we have a lemon and we need to get rid of it, if we need to roll it down. We work with the departments on the needs of the vehicle. over the years, I know PD's vehicles, we have Tahoes and we have Explorers, Fords, and we work with them on how they outfit them because that's what their office is. Just as much as we do with our plow trucks or our bigger equipment, same thing. Most of the vehicles we get come off of a state bid contract. So all of the Tahoes will come off of a state bid contract. Our Peterbilts come off of a state bid contract. We do come to you with a bid waiver for like our plow trucks, bid waiver for Bonnell to build them because they build them all identically the same. This year we went from a different vendor for PD and moved to a different vendor. I can't think of the name. Ultrastrobe to set up their vehicles, and they did a fantastic job. So we kind of work with each department on what they need and what their needs are, and then we track that vehicle from the minute it walks in till the time we get rid of it.
It has been a great thing when you guys instituted that, however many years ago, that has
2010.
worked. Pardon me?
2010.
2010, yeah. Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, and I'm going to put Ms. Dean on the spot here, because this is all getting funded really through economic development. And I will be making some phone calls this week. We have some new developments to talk about that I need to kind of fly by you. But I just, big picture, I know you've gotten the media consultant and different things, and we've been stacking money aside. Your 2021 vision or whatever, I know you fall under administration budget, but just some of the things you're focusing on this year.
Well, I think this may be the year that we spend more than that $50,000 in the Economic Development Fund. 2020 is off to a rip-roaring start, and it's been interesting. The activity that we're seeing is in sectors that, have just been kind of going along for a while. Auto dealers, for one thing. We've got some interesting potential for expansions and renovations, and that's great sales tax for us with no impact on services. They don't use schools, they don't use parks, they just generate tax revenue, both property and sales. So that's really encouraging. We're hearing encouraging things out of the mills. You know about Alpha Media and the fact that that's kicking off next week, and but in addition to that, we're seeing some activity in the ancillary, not only in the Sears box, but Toys R Us and Saturn, and the things, the Ring Gurney Mills, we've known, you know that that's an anchor and that everything feeds off that. Well, we're certainly seeing some movement there. There's some exciting commercial developments that we've just recently become aware of further west down the main Grand Avenue corridor. So I think we're going to keep busy this year, and I do think that we'll have some exciting things to bring to the board, hopefully in the next few months.
All right, how's our media consultant working out with our?
So she's great. She's a Gurney resident, Lynn Grandstrom, Lynn G Designs, long Gurney history. I think her mother was a Rudd. Is that what she told us? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I
Maybe
think.
is that right, Cheryl?
I think.
So long, deep Gurney roots, which is great. She really knows a lot of our small businesses. So these next two, last week and this week, celebrating Visit Lake County Restaurant Week. So featuring Saludos and Primo as two Gurney restaurants that participated in that, and then moving right into St. Patrick's Day. So this is our weekly show. So starting next week, the mayor will kick off Gurney's Got It on Thursday mornings during the drive time to feature businesses, people, places, things that you should know about in Gurney.
Only one Thursday, I'm not doing it every Thursday.
No. Look, you could. And people would love to listen to it. But no, you're kicking off welcoming Alpha Media next Thursday when we have the ribbon cutting. And then we move into the following week. We'll be celebrating St. Patrick's Day, talking to O'Toole's and Stevens about what they're doing, just as an example of the way that we're going to use our airtime. And then Gurney Garden Center in the spring, and staycations for spring break in between. And so it really starts to allow us, a weekly way to connect with listeners all over Lake County and feature some of our special businesses.
Any other, and again, I do owe all of you a phone. I was out, as you know, last week, so like everything happens when I'm out of town. I have a whole bunch of calls, but we may be like pretty well filled up again here if everything goes the way we think it will go. So Gurney's got it. All right, yeah, I just wanted to make sure
Thank
you
you.
got an
Yes, thank
opportunity to, all right, a lot to chew on here before our next March 23rd, but there'll probably be some changes, Pat.
Yeah, we'll make some tweaks. I mean, I think Brian summed it up early on. So the budget's balanced, been able to maintain fund balance. All the projects we talked about tonight, fire station, the water tower, all the people, the capital, et cetera, doing all that without a property tax. So hence the importance of Ellen and economic development within the community. So we will await to hear from you. If we don't hear anything, we'll continue to make tweaks as we gain more information. As revenue numbers come in, so the December sales tax should be in the next week or so. So we'll see what that number looks like. Obviously, that's our big one for the year. Make those tweaks. If it looks like we need a second workshop, we'll do that the 23rd. If not, we'll be back before you April 6th, 6:40, to talk about whatever changes we made and then have the consideration of the budget on the regular village board meeting agenda.
Brian, Pat, every one of you, phenomenal job on the budget. I know I read it page to page, and it's just incredible when you look back what got done with just 200 employees and a budget made up of consumer spending. You guys maximize every dollar, you do a great job. The planning and the vision and the future, I'm really outstanding. Thank you for what you put into this, and we'll let you know if there's any tweaks we want over the next couple of weeks. So, all right, that is the end of our budget workshop number 1, and we will open the floor to public comment. You guys can move out of the way. The floor is open.
Hello. Hi, I'm Ryan Horth. I live at 4981 South Road here in Gurnee. And it's been a while since I've been here. I read with great anticipation the memo on Home Rule Authority drafted by Klein, Thorpe, and Jenkins. I was quite disappointed to see some of the same basic errors I have seen from the beginning in this memo. After doing a little research, I wonder if the village understands that it hired a law firm that represents polluters.
We hired the law firm that represented Willowbrook and still represents Willowbrook and did the same opinion for Willowbrook.
That's fine that they do represent polluters typically, as well as
They're also
municipalities.
very experienced in municipal law, which is why they were hired. This is responding to Mr. Horath's accusations here.
Well, it's unsurprising that they don't think the village can regulate their clients. So that's all I would like to say. I won't spend too much time on the memo here because the arguments have already been covered and the memo doesn't cover anything new. It just repeats old discredited arguments. One surprising thing the memo does is that it once again clips a quote from the Illinois Constitutional Convention to make it appear that home rule authorities cannot regulate the environment when the actual quote says they can. This keeps happening, and it's important to highlight both versions of the quote to make clear the deception and to make clear what the law actually says. The version of the quote in the memo is as follows, quoting the local government committee of the Constitutional Convention, quote, "Control of air and water pollution, floodplains, and sewage treatment are often cited as important examples of areas requiring regional or statewide standards and control," unquote. Seems like that quote supports the idea that home rule authorities cannot regulate the environment, yes? But here's the full quote. Quote, "Control of air and water pollution, floodplains, and sewage treatment are often cited as important examples of areas requiring regional or statewide standards and control. At the same time, it is quite conceivable that both the state and various local governments can regulate the same activities and carry on the same or related functions without conflict or difficulty." The full quote says the exact opposite of the clipped version. It says home rule authorities can regulate the environment just fine. The quote is of the format, "Some people say this, however, this other thing is actually true." The clipped quote removes the however clause from the quote, reversing its meaning. I contacted Mr. Walsh, who signed the memo, by email. I recommended his firm withdraw the memo because its reasoning is so faulty, its existence will do reputational harm to his firm. And I more specifically stated something must be done about this clipped quote. There are only 2 explanations for how this quote could appear in the memo, and neither one is good for the firm's reputation. The first interpretation is that it was deliberate. The second, more charitable interpretation is that the firm's research was simply substandard, and they did not discover the misleading nature of this quotation. In either case, it should be removed from the memo, as it is wrong. The problem is the memo relies heavily on this clipped quotation for its main argument. But moving on, the main reason I'm here tonight is to warn the village board and residents that the village is at high risk of facing multiple lawsuits against it. These are not lawsuits based on the imaginary rights of polluters, but lawsuits based on the actual rights of residents, rights specifically granted by the Illinois and United States Constitutions. I'm not sure if anyone here has read the Illinois Constitution lately, specifically Article 11. I'll read the text of Article 11 so you know what I'm referring to. Section 1, Public Policy, Legislative Responsibility. The public policy of the state and the duty of each person is to provide and maintain a healthful environment for the benefit of this and future generations. The General Assembly shall provide by law for the implementation and enforcement of this public policy. Section 2, Rights of Individuals. Each person has the right to a healthful environment. Each person may enforce this right against any party, governmental or private, through appropriate legal proceedings, subject to reasonable limitation and regulation as the General Assembly may provide by law. Section 2 of Article 11 is quite important. It establishes that residents have a right to a healthful environment, and it specifically grants a legal cause of action to enforce this right against any party that is not upholding this right. Governments are by default immune from legal action over political decisions, but not when it comes to the environment. The Illinois Constitution specifically revokes this immunity to enable residents to enforce their right to a healthful environment. This includes a home rule authority that refuses to use its power to protect its residents. By declining to take action against ethylene oxide, the village leaves itself open to a lawsuit from residents to enforce their Article 11 rights. The second risk of lawsuit faced by the village derives from rights in the United States Constitution. The Fifth Amendment includes many personal protections, among them the statement, "Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation." This is known as the Takings Clause, and there is a long and robust judicial history establishing the parameters and tests for whether an action constitutes a taking of property. In recent decades, case law has established that subjecting some residents in a municipality to a nuisance that others are not subjecting to constitutes a taking of their property if the nuisance is severe enough. This means the municipality must pay fair market value for the land at issue. The village runs the risk of many lawsuits filed against it by residents who live around Vantage, asking the court to compel the village to buy their property. Lawsuits based on the Takings Clause have become a focus of environmental justice advocates in recent years because they have been more successful than traditional environmental lawsuits. In such lawsuits, the burden shifts from the resident being required to prove the village acted with malice to the village having to prove it did not uniquely burden the resident's land. The village will struggle to defend such lawsuits, particularly when I hear from many residents that they have little concern for this pollution because that's in East Gurnee, or that's on the other side of town, or that's on the other side of the train tracks, all things I've heard repeatedly from many residents of Gurnee. It goes without saying the village would not allow an ethylene oxide emitting facility to open today in West Gurnee. So what do you think a court will say about its continued allowance of such a facility on the east side of Gurnee? Is the village prepared for these lawsuits, which I know are being contemplated and spoken about right now? Is the village ready to go to war with residents to defend the privilege it extends to one company to release a carcinogen into the air? Is the village prepared to buy the property surrounding Vantage, including any other industrial properties that certainly have a substantial fair market value? The operator of one such property told us over a year ago he had wondered for a long time why so many of his employees have cancer. Is the village ready to buy that facility so he can relocate away from the pollution? Thank you for your time.
Andy, I want it very clear on the record, Mr. Horath has a law degree and by choice does not have a law license. He has never practiced municipal law. He's never litigated municipal law. And the village certainly will not take legal advice from Mr. Horath. That's your choice not to have a legal license.
That's fine.
No reflection,
I
that's
do
your
have a
choice.
license. It's not active, there's a difference. I would like to just state that I think that that's pretty petty, and it's fairly obvious.
It's the truth.
No, it's fairly obvious that the village does not take official legal advice from someone they do not engage as a legal advisor. The village didn't listen to Northwestern Law School, so why would they listen to a resident? I'm
We
just
take our
asking.
advice from municipal law
Yes,
attorneys.
but I'm asking as a resident that you listen to me.
You didn't ask anything. You're telling us. So
Okay.
you had your say, I have my say.
All
I
right.
want it on the record so that people understand why we're not taking legal advice from you.
I think that goes without saying. Obviously, I'm not the village's lawyer. I mean, it's just really petty to say that on the record for the record. And I think that's the purpose of that. So I just want to make my comment about that. So,
Any other public comment?
Jim Sanchez, Gurnee, 4903 Darlene Drive. I just want to make a quick comment about the ethylene oxide issue as well. I don't understand why this is such an adversarial thing up here. From this side of the, as a resident here, what we're seeing is you guys, the perception is you guys are ineffectual at best, you know? And again, snapping at residents when they're offering opinions and, you know, putting out minimal information. I feel like in this whole, since this whole thing's unraveled, you know, the heart of the problem lies with this board right here. Because instead of, you know, coming with the community together to show concern, we feel like we're fighting you guys. And it's, I don't know if, you know, it doesn't make sense. And if you are doing things, I feel like you're not communicating it well enough to us, so it makes us seem that either you don't care or you're siding with a company that's polluting the town. And I have a child that'll be starting in District 56 in the fall in kindergarten, you know, and it's terrifying. Then I've spoken to Colleen, the superintendent over at 56 too, and I feel they're waiting for direction. All those people too. I mean, this fell into everybody's lap. And they're waiting for you guys to take some direction, take some initiative. And all they get is, you know, deferment and these you know, adversarial interactions and stuff like this. That's the perception in the community. Because everybody I speak to, including those people, don't want this here. They want something done. And the perception is Gurnee just is, you know, lackluster at best. And I don't understand it because it doesn't make sense. You talk about Willowbrook, they work together. We're working against each other here. Meanwhile, do you think it's going to go away? Do you think that, you know, people are just going to forget that we have ethylene oxide in this community? It's not going to go away. This is here to stay until it gets fixed. And I don't see how it gets fixed when we're fighting each other as opposed to standing united, telling the rest of the state, other legislators, that we need this out of the town. It's not going to be forgotten. People are going to continue to get cancer. I was at that legal forum. Lawyers are sizing up. I mean, whatever. It's going to turn into a mess as opposed to us working together. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Your comments?
Hi, my name's Diane Surofka. I've been a resident of Gurnee for 33 years. And this is an open meeting. This is not a closed meeting. This is a meeting for transparency. 4 months ago, I asked to please have the audio system checked. We sat over here. I could not hear anything that you said, Mr. Gardner. I could hear very little of what the mayor said. The fire department and the police department had better sound than you did. And yet I'm sure that you had very pithy and important comments. We couldn't hear them. So I'm asking again, either have the audio system checked or get another one. That's number one. Number two, thank you for mentioning the pettiness. Because usually, and I'm glad that we're recording, usually the pettiness comes out before Mr. Horath even says his name. Usually it looks like this, with the mayor stopping the board and mentioning about his credentials, which has nothing to do with it. We know by now how you feel about Mr. Horath. You don't do that for any other resident of the city. You never say that this person is a school teacher, you don't have to listen to them about the students. You never say that. I made a comment about how it's his turn, it's public comments. When I get up here or other people get up here, you say to the board, this is their comment time, we don't talk about it, we'll get back to them, and stop it. However, today I mentioned that it's his time, you cut me off, that you have an opportunity to talk, it's his question. Yet when other questions are posed, you don't answer them, so I'm kind of conflicted. It's concerning. It becomes very concerning when we keep amping it up now 15 months. It's very frustrating. I don't expect a response. All I do is I ask to hear the comments. I ask you to hear the comments, not only of me, but for other people from ETO. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Adrienne Doherty from Heather Ridge, and I just wanted to thank all of the Public Works people who are represented here tonight, who do just an amazing job, and the board who does an amazing job. Gurnee is a fabulous place, and it gets better all the time. And I know I've been on the receiving end of the marvelous paramedics of Gurnee, and did 2 life-saving trips for me. They're just absolutely stellar, amazing, amazing people, and I thank you. It's just hard for me to reconcile all the hard work and all the thought and all of the good intentions of these incredibly talented and committed people, when at the same time there is this stealth health threat. It's not like the coronavirus, which is something we know about. It's something that's invisible, that's there every day, and the results usually show up quietly in the office of an oncologist. And I'm just asking everyone to think about it every day when they work so hard and diligently at running this really great city. How can we make it even better? The good news is that we've got residents and people working for the city who really care, who are really committed and devoted to making this be a healthy, vibrant, stable, sustainable community. And I just think this doesn't need to be a divisive issue. This just needs to be looked at and talked about. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to add one more thing, is to say that I don't do this because I have any animosity against anyone in the board or in the village, and I don't do this because I want to show anyone up or look good or whatever. I do this because I care and because I think that the village is getting bad advice and is not following the proper direction, and it's going to be disastrous in the future. And these potential lawsuits that I mentioned, these are not something I just made up. There is real case law to back this, and at our legal forum, the plaintiff's attorneys were not shy about discussing that this is one strategy and one prong of what will occur. And the only question is when, and whether it will take a backseat to suing the companies, because the companies have more money. But these kind of lawsuits have succeeded, and there is strong case law on this. So that's, I don't have any kind of animosity toward anyone here. I would just like to see results and some more action and more consideration of what the residents believe in. Thank you.
And I think
You know what? No, don't.
the only point that I wanted to make is, you did indicate you talked to Mr. Walsh, or you sent an email. Okay, but I really do want the public to know that the village has always taken the position that it's looking at this and will continue to look at that, and it depends on what the state does. The state did take some action. And so it's an ongoing process always, and we know there's going to be another round of testing. But a lot of times it is very difficult up here when criticism that comes out of what some people could perceive as being we can't really reconcile where that criticism comes from when it's kind of prefaced as a legal argument. And that's sometimes difficult if someone comes to the microphone and they take issue with a legal argument, and then they might read some portions of that. But I just want to state for everyone. The law firm was hired. They're not a public official. They have very strong reputations, and they're well-meaning, and their client was the village. And we know this is an area of public interest to the public. Currently, there is no litigation, although there's been mention tonight, you know, where I think threatening of litigation, that never makes anyone feel better about things. But again, I just want to echo what's already been said, is that Klein Thorpe is, I think they probably represent more municipalities in Northern Illinois than any other firm, have a very strong reputation. And I did see the report. I thought it followed the methodology that I'm certainly accustomed to in doing municipal work. And so because they're not here, I did want to at least indicate that they do have a very strong reputation, and they certainly would stand behind their report that they did issue for the village. And, you know, I just wanted to make that point.
Just ask one more question. Hi, Adrienne Doherty again. I just had a thought, and I'm want just maybe take this home and think about it. Could it ever be possible to have a friendly sit-down, kind of throwing ideas and facts and whatnot across the table, just as an information kind of visioning, you know, let's just lay this out and look at it and see what this really is, so that there isn't this kind of us and them that doesn't need to be here, that's just so counterproductive, and it's not good for you, it's not good for anybody, really, it's a waste of time. Would it be ever possible to have some kind of at the library or here, some kind of a, you know, back and forth discussion? So I'm just going to put that out there. Have a good evening.
Thank you. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by trustee Balmas. Second by trustee Thorstensen. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.